Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming out, as it were, to see and hear me on a Thursday morning. I hope everyone's doing okay. I'm going to start off by taking a little bit of a risk, and at the risk of revealing just exactly how old I am, I'm going to tell you all the first album I ever bought was Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. And I listened to it again just the other day, and to me, at least, it sounds just as good as it used to. So I'm Jeff Sussna. My background is building systems and leading organizations across the entire product delivery lifecycle. I've worked as a developer, as a tester, as an ops person. So you could say I have the poster child DevOps resume, as it were. For the last 10 years now, I've run Sussna Associates, a local consulting firm. And our focus is working with digital product organizations and helping them create effective Agile and DevOps practices in order to create truly customer-centered learning organizations. And we typically get brought in to diagnose and repair people's existing Agile and DevOps implementations. We did the Scrum training, we do the ceremonies, we rearranged all the desks, but something's still not right. We have a DevOps team, we're running Kubernetes, but something's still missing. What are we doing wrong? And in our experience, what they're doing wrong is not understanding the principles behind DevOps and Agile and what it is they're trying to accomplish and why that's important, why we need that. And we can be very critical. We talk about, cargo culting Agile or falling prey to the Agile industrial complex or what have you, but really it's not people's fault. Because the truth of the matter is that Agile is kind of mysterious about itself. If you read the Agile Manifesto, it talks about uncovering better ways of developing software, but doesn't really say what they are. And it has these kind of mysterious value statements. We value working code over documentation. Well, why? I remember the first time I read that, I thought it was crazy. And over time, I was able to wrap my head around it and start to appreciate it, but I was pretty much left on my own to do it. And DevOps is even worse. It doesn't matter how you define DevOps, somebody will tell you that you're wrong. DevOps is a professional and cultural movement. Well, what does that even mean? And I think it's helpful to go back to the dictionary definition of the word agility, which means the efficiency and effectiveness with which you can change direction. It's not about speed. If you're skiing, the best way to go fast is not to turn. In downhill, every course correction slows you down. But the problem we have is a slalom problem, where the challenge is how early and smoothly and continuously you can turn. Unfortunately, though, all too often what this ends up turning into is more work faster, and not the ability to deliver the right thing at the right time for the right reasons. And there are a number of pitfalls that we see organizations fall into when they start thinking about more work faster. The first one is the feature factory. It means being so consumed with what you're building and what you're pushing out the door and giving to your customers that you lose a sense of context or why you're doing what you're doing, or what your relationship is with your customer, or even really who they are. It tends to use manufacturing metaphors and talk about development as an assembly line process. The problem is that metaphor doesn't actually work. The idea of an assembly line is to make as many things as possible that are all exactly the same as each other. Every single Honda Accord Sedan LX that comes off the assembly line should be exactly the same as all of the others. But with software, effectively what we're doing is we're redesigning the product every single time we ship it. Every time we add a feature, we are changing the product and changing the user experience in some fashion. So this idea of manufacturing and assembly lines doesn't actually work at all. The second pitfall is tunnel vision. When we get so focused on this is what I'm doing, I'm working on story 1, 2, 3, we're in sprint 265, that you don't have a sense of where you're trying to go or what it is that you're actually delivering or what your vision is. The third pitfall is managing for output. How many bugs did we fix this week? Why didn't we fix more? Oh, we managed to do a release in 2 weeks instead of 4, but we only shipped 10 things in that 2 weeks. How can we ship 20 things? There's a very unfortunately named book that was written by one of the Scrum co-founders called Twice the Work in Half the Time. And what he was trying to talk about was the idea that if you waste less time going off into the weeds, building the wrong thing in the wrong way, and you adjust your work more continuously, you can actually increase your productivity tremendously. The problem is that people tend to hang on to the name, twice the work in half the time, and miss the spirit of it. The fourth pitfall is hard coding the destination in advance. We are building this year. And Agile starts to turn into a micromanagement technique as opposed to a real agility technique. And you see things like roadmaps that tell you exactly what you're going to deliver when and in what order. We're going to do this in Q1, this in Q2, this in Q3, this in Q4. And then somebody says, but we're Agile, which means we might change the dates. In other words, this roadmap is a work of fiction. And its primary purpose is to frustrate you because it represents a set of promises that we're telling you up front we're not actually going to keep. And the final pitfall is a subtle but really important one because it underlies all of the others. We think that our jobs are to do things and make things. My job is to design and build widgets. My job is to write automated tests. My job is to tip up Kubernetes clusters. And we don't understand, well, is the work that I'm doing actually helping? Is it actually meeting the need? Is it actually making development higher quality or faster or smoothing the path to production? If people aren't able to use and understand the things that we build, it doesn't actually do anyone any good. And what all of these pitfalls do is they trap us in a false tension between agility and strategy. And the kinds of questions that I get from clients are things like, well, we know we need to empower our teams in order to scale, but how do we make sure they make good business decisions? How do we make sure that everybody knows why they're building what they're building? How do we actually make meaningful improvements in our customers' experience and not just sort of nibble around the edges in 2-week increments? And finally, well, how do we give our customers a sense of what's going on beyond the next 2 weeks? And the way to resolve this tension is to shift our focus away from delivering features and towards continuously evolving the value that we create for our customers and users. And so what I want to do now is I want to talk about a set of 5 principles that to me capture the essence of what it is that Agile and DevOps, when done well, make possible. The first one is to make the customer your compass. And I'm going to let you in on 3 secrets. The first secret is that customers don't actually want to buy features. What they want to buy is help getting something done that they're trying to do that they can't do on their own. And so making the customer your compass means flipping the equation and starting by thinking about your customer and what it is that they're trying to do before you think about what it is that you're trying to do. The second secret is that when everyone understands why they're doing what they're doing, quality and flow and creative problem solving magically get better. And the third secret is that when you're trying to figure out how do you scale Agile and DevOps teams, the way to do it is not by trying to align everybody's work. That's how you build Rube Goldberg machines that become slow and brittle again. But to align around the benefit that you're all trying to deliver and give the teams the freedom to figure out for themselves how to contribute to delivering it. Now, what we're really talking about here is a shift from thinking in terms of outputs to outcomes. And that's really hard for people. So I want to take just a minute and walk through a few examples of what we really mean by that. So for example, why do you book a night in a hotel? Why do you get a room in a hotel? Because you need a good night's sleep while you're traveling. And so you may value features like a comfortable bed and insulated walls and the ability to control the temperature so it isn't constantly too hot or too cold. And the reason that we complain about slow or expensive Wi-Fi in hotels isn't because we're just whiny. It's because we need to do things like get work done or send emails or reserve a table at a restaurant or find out the weather. The point is that we need to do more than just sleep and brush our teeth. Why do we need Slack? What is Slack for? Well, Slack lets us get work done together across boundaries. If everybody were in the same room at the same time working for the same manager, you wouldn't need Slack. What is Jenkins for? What is the benefit of running a Jenkins server? Is it to do a build and run your tests every time somebody commits code? No, it's the ability to find and fix integration bugs more quickly and more easily. So if you don't pull the on cord and stop the build and fix it, the simple fact that you're running a Jenkins server doesn't actually mean very much. So what does it look like to make your work customer-centered? Well, first, it means that you're organizing your work and your teams for service and not just software, for the end-to-end service delivery lifecycle. So that you're thinking about things like, how do people onboard your changes? How do they learn about them? How do they get support with them? How do they read documentation about them? I worked with an organization where support would get phone calls about features they literally had never heard of, which first of all is kind of embarrassing, but more importantly, it means they can't actually help the person who's calling. Secondly, it means that when you're planning and executing and testing your work, you're not just thinking about what it is that are supposed to be in the features, that when you're organizing your epics and your stories and your test plans and so on and so forth, you're thinking about the value that's being delivered. Why are we building this widget? How is it that we define success in the customer's eyes? And finally, it means managing teams towards outcomes as opposed to output. So instead of, well, did we finish these 24 stories or did we fix these 23 bugs? It's, did we move the value forward the way that we meant to? The second principle is seeing the horizon so that you are approaching your work on a daily basis in terms of, well, where are we trying to go? Another way to say that is, what is it that we're actually promising to deliver? Are we getting where we're trying to go? How well are we fulfilling those promises? And is that where we actually want to be going? Are they actually the right or the best promises to make? And when we approach our work that way, we can reimagine some of the classic ceremonies that we do that sometimes feel frustrating. So instead of doing a stand-up where everyone just goes around and says, I'm working on story 1, 2, 3, no blockers, you could talk about what it is that you delivered, how you delivered on your customer promise today. I actually encourage teams to do their stand-ups in the afternoon instead of the morning, because they're talking about what they're finishing and delivering or not and what to do about it, instead of just, this is the code I'm going to write today. I see too many retros that suffer from what I like to call the not enough muffins effect. Imagine your team has a tradition where somebody brings muffins in for everyone every Monday morning, and there are never enough muffins. And you have your retro and somebody says, well, once again, we didn't have enough muffins. You really need to bring twice as many as you think. That's a perfectly good problem to solve, but it doesn't really have anything to do with how effective your Agile process is. A better question is, well, how well did we deliver on the promises we made during this sprint or whatever? And finally, I see too many sprints where the sprint goal is do these 24 stories. And at the end of the sprint, you say, well, did we do the 24 stories or did we do 23 or did we do 25? The point of the sprint is not just to add some database indexes. The point of the sprint is to make search 15% faster. And that's how you know whether you've reached your sprint goal. The third principle is applying small, frequent inputs. This is the most important sentence I'll say. If you take nothing away from this talk except this one, take that, which is make your work smaller. All kinds of magical and wonderful things happen at the psychological and the social and technical level when you make your work smaller. And the thing to do is simply to find the smallest valuable thing that you can do next. And we also have to think about the effective size of our work. If it only takes an hour to write the code, but it waits 3 days to get tested, and then it waits 2 more weeks to get documented, and then it waits another week to get released, the effective size of that 1 hour piece of work is actually 3 or 4 weeks. I see teams struggle with, well, how do we break our work down into small pieces and still feel like we're doing something useful in each of them? But you can actually find the value in almost anything you're doing. And when you take this value-centered approach, you can really start to smooth out the process. So if all you're doing is making a very simple API change, what you're doing is allowing other teams and maybe even other organizations to access new data. If you're making a schema change, it means that applications can now store additional information. If you've released something but it's behind a feature flag, it may feel useless, but if your feature flags are sufficiently flexible, it means that the business can now experiment with customer feedback and control exactly how and when they want to release it to the market, independently of the work that you've done to build it. And when we think about the size of our work from end to end, it allows us to change the conversation and shift our focus away from quantity and towards flow. Because what it does is, first of all, it gives the business the freedom, the agility, if you will, to change direction more continuously without being disruptive. But at the same time, it reduces the pressure to change direction and to be disruptive. The impact of an important customer request or an important bug when you're in the middle of a 7-day user story is really different than when you're in the middle of a 1 or a half-day user story. And so think of it as waiting for the bus. If the bus comes every 10 minutes, the impact of missing it isn't really a big deal. But if the bus only comes once an hour, it's much more of a big deal. The fourth principle is responding to your surroundings. The thing about the features that we deliver, and the reason I call them inputs, is because every time you deliver a feature, you're changing your product and you're changing the experience in some fashion, is they're really bets. You can't guarantee exactly how they're going to be used or what their impact is going to be until they're in production. And even if you get it right, when you change the product, you're changing the landscape and the environment is changing around you. And what this means is that delivering is not actually what we're trying to do. It's not actually why we do Agile and DevOps, so we can deliver more and deliver faster. The reason we do it is so that we can recalibrate where to go next. And that's actually the central thing we're trying to do with these processes. So as part of being done, we have to analyze those inputs. And we have to ask ourselves questions like, well, we released a schema update to improve performance. Did performance actually improve or not? Did this feature actually meet the customer's need? What new problem or opportunity did our solution create? Because everything is always evolving. And so we need to get out of the mode of kind of fire and forget and pull the next thing off of the queue, and instead make this process of feedback and validating what we did previously the heart of our cadence. So at our stand-ups, we shouldn't just be talking about, well, this is what I did yesterday, or this is what I'm doing today, but we should also be talking, even more importantly, about this is what we learned from what we did yesterday. And this is how it's liable to change what we need to do today or tomorrow. And to be amplifying those signals of what we're hearing back across teams and disciplines and levels, so that developers are hearing what support is hearing, and management is hearing what development is hearing, and so on and so forth. Now, the thing about feedback, it's another one of these things that's really hard for organizations to really use. I did a workshop a few years ago for a company that had a very mature Agile and DevOps practice. I had dinner with them the night before, and I was actually worried that I wouldn't have much to teach them, that it was going to be a really long day. And in the morning, I asked them to do an exercise, which was to take one of their linear processes and transform it into a circular feedback-driven process. And they all kind of smiled and chuckled, and one person raised his hand and said, well, we don't actually have any linear processes anymore. We've made them all circular. And I said, okay, well, indulge me. Let's do the exercise, and maybe it'll be really quick, and then we can go on with the rest of our day. And I split them into 4 teams, and 3 of the 4 teams independently came to the same conclusion, which they very sheepishly reported to me, which was they realized that they were really good at collecting feedback, but they didn't actually do anything with it. And they recognized that they were wasting tremendous amounts of time and money and resources gathering all of this information, but not actually changing what they were doing in response to it. So the 5th principle, and really the punchline, what we're trying to accomplish is the ability to turn with confidence, so that we are continuously, whether it's in the stand-up or the planning meeting or the retro or the portfolio review or whatever, to be asking questions like, are we still headed where we want to go? And do we still want to go there? And the point of continuous delivery is like the metaphor of the bus coming more frequently, is it makes changing course safe. We can finish small things and then decide, are we still headed where we want to go, and do we still want to go there without disruption? And this is the competitive advantage that Agile and DevOps bring. So in closing, I am a big motorcycle road racing fan. And the thing about MotoGP racing is that races aren't won just by the best rider on the fastest bike. It's run by the rider who can make the most continuous decisions, because everyone goes into a race with a strategy, but things change lap by lap. You know, over the course of the race, you use up fuel, your bike becomes lighter, the handling changes. Your tires wear and become greasy. You can't accelerate or brake or turn as aggressively. You had a strategy, you were going to use a particular tire because of the weather conditions, and at the last minute, the sun comes out and warms the track, and your tires wear faster than you expected. Or your strategy was you were going to conserve fuel and tires and then break away at the end of the race, but your main competitor decides to break away at the beginning. And these guys are going from 200 miles an hour to 40 miles an hour and back again, elbow to elbow with 15 other riders. And the ones who win are the ones who are continuously adapting to the changing conditions. And so that is what we're really after with Agile and DevOps. So thank you very much. If you have questions, or you think I might be able to help your organization, or you just want to talk more, please get in touch with me. And thanks for your time. I appreciate it.